In this video, we're going to be taking a look at Arista EDU 100. Arista EDU 100 is a 100 ISO film, which features fine grain, high sharpness, and a wide exposure latitude. From what I understand, this is the exact same film as FOMA's FOMApan 100, and a lot of people really do enjoy that film, and for good reason. I think this is actually a very good film, and it's only $5.99 a roll, so I think if you're looking for a budget-friendly option, this is definitely a great pick. I developed the film as directed by the datasheet. I normally use Xtol, so I did Xtol stock, which is the only one that it has listed for Xtol. But I think if you want to try different dilutions, it does have a D76 1:1. That would probably be a good starting point to experiment with those times, and you could see how you like the contrast and go from there. Okay, getting into the images, we're going to start with the shadow detail, and I metered for this area with the red circle right there on the ribs. This was metered for a zone 5 normal exposure. A lot of times with these cheaper films, the actual ISO of the film doesn't always match up with what it says on the box, so you have to experiment and make sure you're getting the right ISO because you'll likely be underexposed most of the time. But with this film, I found it to be a pretty accurate 100 ISO. Here it is one stop darker at a zone 4, and finally at a zone 3 exposure. Looking closer at the area that was metered for, you could still see plenty of detail there, and I think for a zone 3 this is right on. And as far as wide exposure latitude goes, I think this film holds true in that claim because it looks good in all exposures, but it still holds that shadow detail like you'd want it to, even when underexposed. Moving on to the grain, the film does feature fine grain, and I think with any 100 ISO film that won't necessarily be a problem, but it might come to mind that maybe with a cheaper film it might not be as fine grain as it claims, but I think with this film, the grain does look fine and there's no problem there. I did also want to point out the contrast. Normally the lower ISO of the film, the higher the contrast is going to be, and I think this film does have a nice contrast. At the darkest exposure for the figure, you could see a nice separation between the foreground and the background, and I like that contrast. Currently in the US, this is the cheapest 100 ISO film. If you're in the European market, it might be the FOMApan, but I think for $5.99 a roll, you absolutely can't go wrong with this film. I found it to be very good quality, and I would definitely buy it again. Also, a side note, when I was loading the film onto the Patterson reel, I noticed as soon as you take the tape off of the film, it kind of unravels. It doesn't have like a really tight curl to it, so it's really flat and extremely easy to load onto the reel. And I noticed that with other Arista EDU films that I've used because I tried the 400 one as well, and that one also had the same effect. I noticed it last time, but I wasn't sure if it was every roll that was like that, but it was like that again, so I think it's consistent with them, so that's one thing to consider. This film is really easy to load onto the reel. Overall, I was really happy with this film. I think it's a film that you can use whether you're trying to save money, or I think it's also perfectly capable of being used for more serious work. So it is a versatile film, and being that it's the cheapest 100 ISO film, I think you really can't go wrong. So I would definitely recommend giving this film a try. Have you guys ever shot this film before, and what did you think of it? We'll see you guys next time on The Negative.